Hey everyone, I hope you guys are enjoying Monster Hunter Rise or Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak in whichever platform you're choosing to play it on. Today we're going to be going over some really interesting and perhaps highly suggestive quotes from Yoshitake Suzuki, the director of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, as he basically did a developer interview with Koichi Shibata. This is part of the Capcom developer series of where they basically just discuss with developers not just of base Monster Hunter Rise but Sunbreak some of their ideas from the development process. And specifically in this interview they speak at length regarding the introduction of Monster Hunter Frontiers monsters into Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Remember that director Yoshitake Suzuki was one of the main directors of Frontiers towards one of the later updates. I believe after G4 or something along those lines is when he essentially took over of that more like online focused MMORPG-ish type of Monster Hunter experience, which ended up shutting down back in 2019, I believe it was. So now, you know, he's one of the things that he's speaking to in this specific interview is adding Frontiers monsters into Sunbreak. And one of the open-ended quotes that he mentions or alludes to kind of makes it sound like heading into the future we could end up seeing more Frontiers monsters make their way into, you know, whatever the next mainline game it is. He doesn't necessarily say that for Sunbreak as like a next free title update monster edition or anything like that, but potentially heading into the future. I made a video, I want to say maybe a month ago or so, where I spoke about, you know, flagships making a return, and one of the things that I alluded to in that video was how Frontiers just kind of had to be excused from the fact that so many flagships from that game just simply haven't made their way outside of it. And one of the things that we would love to see is just at the very least Capcom realized that flagship monsters, regardless of whichever version of the game we're talking about, should be making their way into future titles. And maybe it seems like Suzuki is alluding to something along those lines. I'm going to be leaving a link in the description below for the entire interview, and I'm just going to be going over a couple of the questions that they asked him. But simply the introduction reads, for the Frontiers fans, reawakening Espinas for Sunbreak. They mentioned that, hello everyone, Koichi Shibata here, reporting for Monster Hunter Rise developer floor. On our 23rd round of Monster Hunter Rise interviews, I will be talking to director Yoshitake Suzuki about Espinas, whose appearance in Sunbreak caught quite a stir around the fans. And the first question they asked, could he tell us as to what led to Espinas appearing in the game? He mentions that when I was assigned director of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, I decided at a very early age when coming up with the monster roster that I wanted to have monsters from Monster Hunter Frontiers in there. One of the reasons is that I'm a fan of the game and I have lots of good memories of playing it, and I was very sad to see the service ending on December of 2019. It was server operated online game, which meant that fans wouldn't be able to play the game itself anymore. So I thought, what can I do for my fellow Frontiers fans? And this is what I came up with. And of course, Espinas was one of the monsters that was kind of like data mined relatively early on when we started talking about Sunbreak making an appearance post Monster Hunter Rise launch, and it just didn't necessarily steer with the entire motif of Western monsters. It was just one of those, it seemed like the original idea of Sunbreak was, you know, the trio of lords, if you will, the Lunagaron, Garangolm, and Malzeno, but the rest of the monsters that were ended up getting added in post-launch via DLC really had nothing to do with that idea, and they just ended up adding pretty much stuff that they felt hadn't made an appearance, and of course Espinas was one of them. Then the second question they asked, was there anything you were very particular or watchful about? He mentions that since Sunbreak is the follow-up of Rise, I'd had to carry over the general world assigned gameplay and systems. Within those constraints, I really wanted to add something new to the experience, something fresh for fans. Espinas fit that concept to a T, so it was very particular about making sure it was compatible with Sunbreak, while also preserving the monster's visual image, ecology, and actions from the original game. For example, Espinas is always asleep at the start of a quest. When the player starts attacking it, it'll wake up. And in the original game, it would still just walk around for a while without concerning itself with the players. However, since Sunbreak, it needed to preserve the quest tempo in Rise, we made some tweaks here and changed it so that now immediately starts attacking as soon as players wake it up. We made lots of other tweaks as well, such as the changes to the thickness of its hide depending on whether it's angry or not, and everyone on the team was very much aware of having to balance respect towards the source materials with the needs of the gameplay in Sunbreak. And one of the things you will notice, probably one of the highlight things regarding Espinas and Flaming Espinas, which they also allude to in one of the future answers that he provides, is that he really does begin to shine actually when he's angered or enraged. This monster is relatively tame, normally very basic attack combo patterns, normally when he's not enraged, but when he's enraged, he's certainly dangerous, especially when he begins to walk upright and just kind of like really, lay out his massive attacks and actually easily KO players who weren't necessarily prepared for what's coming. And the third question they ask, how did the series producer Ryosu Sugimoto and other people who worked on older Monster Hunter games respond to this? He mentions that, I have to say that I was pretty nervous when I showed up the design documents with all of the new elements of Sunbreak to Sugimoto-san and Ichinose-san. Of course, that's the director of base Monster Hunter Rise. But they were both very positive towards almost all of the elements I proposed. So I remember being very relieved. Of course, there were some things that they ended up shooting down, but I really felt that they were pushing me to make the game I wanted to make, and I'm very grateful for that. Now, right out of the gate, I would have wished if he would have went maybe into more detail as to what exactly it is that they shut down, because there were some rumors regarding just adding even more verticality to the game and maybe putting a little bit of a twist on the wire bugs regarding the way you actually fling them and can use them for like jumping off points. Essentially, you can string them together to kind of fling yourself upwards. And there was something, maybe if I vaguely remember correctly, in the data mines at the back end of the 5.0 update, I believe it was the 5th update regarding the collaborations that we got for base Rise, where it was one of those things where like silk binds had like boosted abilities or whatever added to them, but of course they probably never ended up making it to the final version of the game. So it might have been something that they had been tweaking on, maybe something that he alludes right there to suggesting, but ultimately was shot down. I would have hoped for them to actually go into more details regarding that, but at the end of the day, if we don't really get to see it, maybe it does ultimately end up getting added to the next game. And that is where, the next question comes in. The third Sunbreak trailer that was shown during the Capcom showcase in June of 2022 at the demo at Tokyo Game Show 2022 really got people talking. What kind of response did you get? He says, I got lots of responses from a variety of directors, including from inside the company, which made me very happy. I was also glad to hear that a lot of people wanted to see more monsters from Frontier. However, since Sunbreak was made to be a sequel to Rise, I had to keep the compatibility in mind. So I had already firmly decided from an early stage in the game's design that I was only going to use Espinas, and that I was only going to put all of my love as a fan of Frontiers into this monster. I hope everyone who played the original game can feel that I was trying to get across. That said, we went ahead and added Flaming Espinas too. So this is where I think the really open-ended suggestion comes in, because they're essentially saying that based on Sunbreak being obviously an expansion, he says a sequel, but Capcom's marketing has always made Sunbreak sound like an expansion, which is essentially just what it is, a tacked on DLC. He mentions that due to compatibility, they had to basically just go with Espinas. They couldn't really do more than that. And he alluded that, I believe it was in the second questions, that the gameplay elements and all of that was just, he had to something kind of like pick up on. But at the end of the day, maybe adding more Frontiers monsters is something that he would have wanted to do, but simply just wasn't afforded the liberty to do so because of this restraints from the game. So you can make the argument based on like what he says that due to Rise, Sunbreak's limitations, prevented him from adding more Frontiers monsters. So that makes this seem slightly open-ended where maybe the addition of so many other Frontiers monsters could be making their way for the next mainline game. Again, that is just suggestive and speculation. There has been plenty of rumors regarding Monster Hunter 6, Monster Hunter World 2, Monster Hunter Paradise, which of course, I love talking about that. They could certainly make a heavy push to be able to add more Frontiers monsters into the main line, kind of like I alluded in a separate video. But of course, now we kind of have a true director quote saying, this is open-ended. This, could potentially happen. Which ones they choose to bring in? Well, the good thing is that Frontiers had almost 30, I want to say, in total, 30 to 40 monsters. So many elders. You guys have no idea. If you've never played Frontiers, so many elder dragons and stuff like that was just unique to that game. They have not been available outside of it. So maybe, looking forward to the next mainline game. Yes, laggy coming back, and maybe more Frontiers monsters finally, being, unleashed from what, Frontiers was into another mainline game. But that's about all the information that I wanted to cover with you guys. Do let me know in the comments if you want to see more Frontiers monsters making their way into the game. I'm going to assume that everyone wants to see that. But of course, maybe your favorite Frontiers monsters making its way into this title. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.